Jim Warren, thank you so much for being here. I am thrilled to get to sit down at a table with you anytime, but especially today. Thank you for coming on and being one of my first interviews ever.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Always happy to talk to you.
Okay, so I'm very excited to talk to you today about your career and your life and where you came from and all the exciting things that you have done and the things you're working on now and all the exciting things that you will do in the near future. So I think maybe I heard this question once on another podcast and I'm going to try it out. So
Steal from the best.
Can you try to tell me your life story in 5 minutes or less?
Wow. I'm not sure I can do anything in 5 minutes or less. I am one of 3 kids. My father was career Navy. He flew the A-6 bomber. He was a bombardier navigator. He gave me no sense of direction whatsoever, and he ended up birthing a pinko liberal commie leftist guy, so I don't think he did well on the conservative front either. So we moved around a bunch when I was a kid, and I'm sure that had a big impact on me becoming who I am today. Had a great childhood, loved it. And I'm the youngest of 3, so I had an older brother, 3 years older, and an older sister, and I got to watch them make mistakes that I didn't want to make. So that was the fun of being the youngest for me was, oh, I want to do that, I don't want to do that. And that is kind of a pattern for my entire life and career, is looking at what's out there and getting to pick and choose what I want for me. Mm-hmm. Somehow, I got into my DNA early on that I had the power to make choices, and I wasn't stuck with anything, that I could pick and choose what I thought, what I felt, what I wanted to be, what I didn't want to be. I ended up being the only kid in my family to go to the same high school for 4 years when my dad was stationed at the Pentagon, and then I did not want to go to college. Because I did not want my conservative parents paying for what they thought college was. I wanted to decide where I wanted to live in the country, go set up there, establish my own residency, and then be able to go to college based on my lack of income. And my mom talked me into, give it a try. Give it a try. Give college one. I only applied to 2 colleges. One was a Christian college outside of Chicago, Wheaton College, which was the largest non-denominational college, and one in-state school in Virginia, which happened to be James Madison. Because I knew I wasn't going to go. I took the SATs once after I took a friend to her prom. No future set the way most people at my age at that time did. I went and visited Wheaton, and I so wanted to go there because Chicago was awesome, but I was already way too liberal for a Christian college.
I had my sister-in-law went to Wheaton.
Really? What year?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
Okay.
But she was there, and then Wheaton keeps coming up for me in my story. One of the baker who we use now at both Green Room and Remedy Burger also went to Wheaton and met his wife at Wheaton. So I am familiar with Wheaton.
Well, to stay right on top of that, I mean, this was the early 80s. So this was, I went to college 84 to 88. And so this is not hyperbole. This is the Footloose era. And this school, I went there, they made you sign a pledge that said you will not smoke, dance, play cards for the entire time you're enrolled there. And the students...
I don't think that would have worked out too well.
The students there that I met, whom I liked, said, oh, we all signed the pledge, but we don't follow it. And I was like the only kid I knew that didn't have a fake ID to be able to go into Washington, D.C. and go to the bar. There was no way I could live that kind of life. Mm-hmm. That was not my flavor of integrity. So I wrote that place off because, and I spoke to administrators. Hey, come on, you guys, I know what you believe theologically. You don't believe this stuff is wrong. And they said, no, we don't. But there's such controversial issues in the body of Christ right now that we think it's best to keep it out of here. And I said, I can't be one of you, because that's just, I thought that's the wrong approach.
So you wound up at JMU.
Yes,
Yeah?
and in the first semester, again, this is before the internet, this is before cell phones. I'm on the payphone in the lobby with the bank of payphones, in tears to my parents, saying, "I like it here. I want to stay. I want to study theater, but I'll also get a secondary education degree because I know you think that I should walk out of here with a piece of paper that says I'll get a job." And so I didn't take any of the regular classes. I took acting because I was in one play in high school and was interested. And I took classes in criminology, in psychology. I didn't take any of the basic, what you're supposed to do, which is grade 13, 14, and 15. I didn't do any of that because I didn't know if I wanted to stay. And at one point during my first semester, all these things converged and all of the classes were talking to the other classes. And it was like, hallelujah, this is what I thought college should be. This is what, I don't know what I want to do quite yet, but I know I want to pursue this stuff. And that's when I got bitten by the acting bug, and it very quickly turned into the directing bug. I met a Shakespeare professor who was directing a play for the first time. So he wasn't a theater guy, he was an English department guy, and he was directing a play for the first time, and he cast me as Enobarbus in Antony and Cleopatra. And our Antony sucked so bad that I looked really good. And so I had a great time and developed a friendship with this particular professor who's Ralph Allen Cohen. And we ended up working together on a few things in college. I went to study at the University of London in the program that he created. And it was while I was studying in London that he came up with the idea, what if we do a seminar on how Shakespeare might have staged his plays and then put on Henry V using those ideas? And again, this is pre-internet, pre-cell phone, so we're writing letters back and forth to each other while I'm in London. And I try to convince him that, hey, the best actor at JMU, Charlie Tucker, he shouldn't play Henry V because he's like tall and good looking and everybody will follow him. You need a short dude who's good with the language. That's what Henry V should be. So I conned him into casting me as Henry V. And I believe that I want to think I'm the shortest person to ever conquer both England and France.
I think that sounds right.
And it was during that project where studying as many materials as we could to discover how Shakespeare's company might have staged its plays, and then doing that play like that was so much fun. That was in my senior year of undergraduate. And I said, we should start a professional company using these ideas. Not because we think we want to build a theater or do anything long term. It's, man, isn't Shakespeare cool when you do it like this? Anybody that we put this in front of is going to be turned on to Shakespeare. People who think they don't like Shakespeare, people who love Shakespeare. This is just too much fun to not share it with the world.
Tell us a little bit, so Shenandoah Shakespeare Express, tell us how that started,
Okay.
and then it turned into the American Shakespeare Center, and from there, it really just continued to explode and get bigger and bigger over the years. So
Yeah.
What was the cause of the success from the beginning, and how did you go from the Shenandoah Shakespeare Express to the American Shakespeare Center?
With this production of Henry V that was, what did we call ourselves? The JMU Shakespeare Players? Something like that. In saying, let's take this idea and start a professional company, it was pretty much doing the same thing, but just doing it outside the confines of a college production. So it was that first year after Henry V, our first Shenandoah Shakespeare Express production was Richard III. And one of the reasons that we chose Richard III was because the guy who played Mercutio in my senior honors thesis production of Romeo and Juliet, he played Mercutio in that play, and I thought he'd make a great Richard. And I believe we are wrong about this, but at the time we thought Richard III was Shakespeare's first big hit, so we should start our company with Shakespeare's first big hit. And we did 14 performances of Richard III. And so it was all college students. They were working in between their classes and other shows that they were in. And what we were hoping for is that we would eventually be able to pay them gas money at the end of this 14 performance tour in the month of December. And so basically we went anywhere that would have us. May we please come to your high school gymnasium and sleep on your floor in sleeping bags and perform for your students the next day.
Wow.
And it was all rural Virginia schools, with the exception of we played one inner city school in Washington, D.C. And the way that I tell the story, it was the beginning of a snowball. What we found was we were right. People love this shit. And you know, again, high school kids who think that Shakespeare sucks were like, oh, who did the translation? Because they understood it. This interactive, leaving the lights on, putting the audience on three sides of the playing area, you know, recreating Shakespeare's staging conditions makes an environment that Shakespeare scholars loved us because we were so true to the language, and younger folks who didn't know they were supposed to be afraid of it just saw exciting, in-your-face guerrilla Shakespeare. Okay,
so wait, tell me a little bit about that for people who might not know. I mean, that was the thing that really differentiated Shenandoah Shakespeare Express and then later the American Shakespeare Center was what you call Shakespeare's staging conditions. So what are those, and what is it about it
and that's what
that's
came
special?
out of that seminar on Henry V, was studying how did Shakespeare put on his plays. And I don't remember at exactly what point I coined the phrase Shakespeare's staging conditions. But the idea of, if Shakespeare really is this genius, then he was writing for a kind of theatrical environment 400 years ago that's just changed a lot. And we thought that if we could recreate some of the staging conditions that Genius Boy was writing for, we could uncover some of the magic that he wrote into the plays that I think gets covered up sometimes when you play with all the cool tricks and technology. So it's not that Shakespeare can't be done with all kinds of tricks and technology. It's that he didn't have that available to him, and that's why he wrote the way he wrote. I think that if he wrote with all those tricks, he would have written completely different stories. So I think that the big things that I call Shakespeare staging conditions start with a phrase that we came up with that we put on bumper stickers and T-shirts and made a lot of money. We do it with the lights on. What I called shared light now. Audience and actors sharing the same light, so that on a performance day at the Globe, back when those original productions were going on, nobody was more than 54 feet away from the stage. So you're in a 3-story donut with audience members lit on all sides of the playing area. That genius playwright, and all of the playwrights at the time, we think, wrote that visible audience into the world of the play. So Henry V's army, Richard III's army, Richmond's army, Richard III's confidant when he's alone on stage. These are ways to connect with the audience, have the audience participate in the story. The whole idea of the fourth wall that we as modern theater makers have grown up with wasn't a part of any of the Renaissance writing.
And the fourth wall being basically the TV screen, right?
Yeah.
What's separating the actors from the audience is this imaginary veil or cloak, or the wall that's between the audience and the actors.
It's a style of theater that developed well after Shakespeare, where we stopped putting audience around the stage. We put them only on one side of the stage. We started turning the lights off on them so that they were looking up at this other world as if they were peering through the fourth wall into some other world. Okay. So the audience became spectators for a world that was up there under the lights while they sat in the dark.
But that's not what Shakespeare was doing.
No, and again, the dude was great. He could have written great plays for that other kind of environment, but he wrote for this thing that is more like you know, a sporting event, a comedy club, a concert at a small club that doesn't have a big light show. It's about a kind of entertainment where the audience is involved. And at this point, when we started the Shenandoah Shakespeare Express, that was 1988. The Globe in London hadn't been built. Sam Wanamaker was operating on a separate track that we were, which was, what if we return these plays to the staging conditions that they were written for? Can't we discover some cool shit that is just so different than 1980s Shakespeare? So Leaving the Lights On was a big thing. Thrust stage, audience surrounding the playing area on at least 3 sides. Relatively small acting companies. Even though these plays, especially the histories and the tragedies, have 40 and 50 characters, we think that he wrote for a smaller group of actors to double and triple and maybe even quadruple. Same actor come out several times as different characters. He didn't want to pay a company of 40 actors when he could pay a company of 15.
Imagine that. I wonder why.
And again, that creates a different kind of environment for the audience where they know damn well that's Ben Reed on stage, and they see in the program that Ben Reed is playing 4 different parts, and if they've seen Ben Reed before, then they like him, and they can't wait to see who he comes out as next.
Well, and that makes me think that was another thing that, so full disclosure for those who don't know, I was an actor with the American Shakespeare Center for many, many seasons, and one of the things that was very unique to the American Shakespeare Center, I came in later on in the company's history, and so everything had already been pretty well established by the time that I got there, but sharing the same pool of light, being connected with the audience, doing these plays without a bunch of spectacle, meaning crazy effects or no lights other than the shared lights that are on altogether. It does create this sort of intimacy between the audience and the actors to a point where you start feeling like you know these people because you've now seen them do one show one night, another show the next night, and then a third show on Sunday, and now one weekend, and you've seen this person for 6 hours. And now you're like, I know who that Benjamin Reed is. I know that's one of the ASC actors. And if I see him in town, I'm going to stop him and wave. And it creates community. I mean, don't you think that's a big part of?
It creates community on a small level in that theater during a performance, and then you multiply it by the number of performances a week, a month, a year.
Right.
Rotating repertory is another huge part of Shakespeare's staging conditions that is often not a part of modern theater. So you combine all of that with a town that you want invested, that you want to buy tickets, that you want to feel a part of the action when they're in the theater, but you also want them to feel like they own the theater, that it's a part of them.
Yeah.
It's like little community, bigger community, bigger community, bigger community. The circle just keeps going wider and wider because it's all about community. And it starts with a community of actors. Even people who may not love each other off the stage, may not hang out at each other's houses, but they're on a mission together. There's a teamwork element to this style of production, to this community that night, the next night, the month, the year, the town, that you end up feeling like a gang. A gang that is supported by people walking down the street. Some of my favorite stories are people stopping me on the street and saying, "You're Shakespeare," and I know that they do that with actors too.
Right.
Or it's oh no, I saw you as Richmond in Richard III.
Right.
Way to go.
Well, I think going to that same point of the community of actors, so you've got a group of people who are creating multiple plays in repertory. So they're doing different plays every night. They've rehearsed these plays together. They, often you would open one and then open a second. Then you're in rehearsals for a third as you're performing the first two. So you're in rehearsals, you're performing together, you're creating community there. Now the audiences are coming in, they're becoming involved. There's the administration, they're a part of that community and that effort to put the work forward. And then I think another thing, it's that repertory in that actors play extremely different roles on different nights, and how that makes you feel like you really do get to know someone. I mean, I just recently remember Meg Rogers, who played Juliet in a season, and one of the Dromios in Comedy of Errors. So playing a tragic heroine one night, and then going and playing a comedic clown the next, and being able to witness that transformation really connects you into the company and into the plays and into the actors in a way that I mean, I can't think of anything else that does that.
I think that because the company was born with scholarship in mind, with trying to study whatever sources we could to discover how Shakespeare might have done his plays. Scholarship's always been important. And so I think it's important, as you say that, to point out that there are things that we think Shakespeare's company did that we don't do quite the same way. And so I think that there's more evidence pointing towards his original audience didn't get to see the same actor play as many different types of roles. It was Richard Burbage who created the title character probably of almost every Shakespeare play that he wrote.
Wow.
That if you were a hero, you played a hero. If you were a clown, you always played a clown. If you were a villain, you always played a villain. It was easy to take that idea and twist that so that in a modern era, you could get actors to stretch beyond those types, those perhaps stereotypes, perhaps sometimes stock characters, and that you could give an audience an even greater treat by doing exactly what you said. Heroine one night, clown the next night.
Yeah.
And I also think that was part of how do we take the scholarship and how do we make it work for us in as many ways as possible, but don't be afraid to go away from that when there's something that might be able to serve the 20th and 21st century theater makers and audiences at the same time.
Right, because in Shakespeare's day, we didn't have females on stage at all. We
Right.
had no people of color on stage at all.
Right.
There were all kinds of inequities that were involved in that day that we have no interest in bringing into the modern era and the modern perspective.
That's what I think. And, and I think that I often talk about the spirit of Shakespeare's staging conditions more than creating a museum-like replica of what his shows might have been. This is not to knock Williamsburg, Virginia, but this is not Williamsburg on theater steroids.
Yeah, it's not a museum piece.
Right.
This is meant to be a live, active theater. It's meant to capitalize on a word we'll get back to here in just a minute, but meant to capitalize on the experience of a theatrical event.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what's cool, that if you wanted to start a theater company using Shakespeare staging conditions, and I wanted to start a different company, we might pick and choose slightly different things that we want to focus on. There are some people who think the scholarship says that Shakespeare's company didn't rehearse very much. There's no evidence of that. And so sometimes some companies, that's what they will focus on. Mark Rylance, when he was at the Globe, wanted to focus on how can we make clothing that closely resembles the clothing from Shakespeare's day. So they would stitch actors they'd sew them into their costumes because there's a lot of evidence that points to that.
Huh.
I call it the dyed in urine approach because they would use urine as a dye. And that never really appealed much to me.
Okay, so the American Shakespeare Center at its peak was a $4 million a year
Yeah.
budget.
Yes.
And you started with
$500
college students.
Yep, and we started with $500 budget for that Richard III. $350 of that $500 was to buy 2 lifetime guaranteed swords for Richard and Richmond to fight at the end. And of course, they broke during that 14 performance run.
Well, so how do you go from broken swords, $500 budget, to a $4 million a year fully professional company with a full-time staff and benefits and all that?
I mentioned the snowball. So once we started, what became really clear to me was, as a director, as a business person, I knew that this product we were creating had tons of appeal. As I said, high school kids on the one hand, Shakespeare scholars on the other. And because I started the company with a Shakespeare professor, I think that one of the secrets to our success was the Shakespeare professor mafia. We would have been a company that was in Virginia and stayed in Virginia if we could sell ourselves that way. After that, those first 14 performances, it became, well, how many more performances can we do? If we tour when these students are not in school, then we can make more money. Oh my gosh, if I can have actors available for an entire semester, then I can milk the Shakespeare professor mafia and get them to book us at their universities as far and wide as possible. Oh my gosh, I can do that in the fall. So we went from 88 students. In 1988, we had all students. In 1989, we also had all students. I left. We can go back to this later. I left and moved to Los Angeles because I thought, okay, this worked. This was cool. I don't need to do this anymore.
Really? I never knew that.
My partnership with my Shakespeare professor, buddy, friend, mentor, mentee, it was not the shared experience that I thought it was going to be. So I was like, I'm done. This is good. I'm moving to Los Angeles, and I'm going to see what I can do there as an actor, as a director. And he kept it going while I was gone, which I never thought would happen. And I worked in Los Angeles at a post-production house. And at the time, it was the largest post-production house in Hollywood. I got totally lucky and completely circumvented the norm in Los Angeles, which is supposed to be, the travel nightmare. I learned how to drive in Washington, D.C., which I thought, was bad. And then L.A. Was bad. I got a job at a production house in Hollywood on Sunset and Gower, and I found a place to live a block away. So I walked to work wow. and learned so much about the business of putting together TV shows and commercials, and I worked as a grunt for this post-production house, and I loved it for a year, and I was looking for something else to do, and I'd stopped auditioning for stuff because this was too much fun, and so I thought about going further into the editing world, and I thought about all kinds of other crazy things, of joining the Peace Corps, doing things for life experience to bring back into acting and directing. Ralph had kept the company going without me. And again, this was back before the internet, so we're writing letters back and forth. And because I was at a point of transition, I thought, well, he kept it going. If I don't go back now, maybe there won't be anything to go back to later. Maybe this is the sign that I should go back and see what I can do with building that company. So that was 1990 into 91, and that's when we started to perform more often, to make more money, to pay actors to be able to do this. And right. So it took until halfway through 1992 that I was able to commit to, I think I can sell this enough if I have full-time professional actors that if you're available all the time, then I can sell that product all the time enough to pay you to be available full time. And so it started with, look, we can't pay much, but we can provide you housing, lots of food on the road, and this amount per week. I guessed wrong that first amount of time, and it also happened to be, so I guessed wrong and was paying actors too much money, and we went to Edinburgh, Scotland, to the Edinburgh Festival.
Wow.
We played at the Folger Shakespeare Library in D.C. We rented theaters in Chicago and Boston in the summer when we weren't able to play at colleges. And we should have lost our shirts at several places along the way. But somehow I was able to keep us ahead of the bills that were due and continue to make more money, so that by 1993, I was able to offer 12-month contracts and tour coast to coast. And again, actors weren't making a lot, and maybe not every actor could have done it. But I had actors who saved money. I had actors who were paying mortgages on houses from where they were from, even though it was a relatively small amount of money. But it was about taking that leap for us to continue to grow, I need to take the chance that I can book it and make the money to pay the people. And where it could have killed us a few different times, it didn't. And so, again, with this thing that it was so popular, people just kept wanting this more and more and more. And that's why that snowball was able to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it went from the Shakespeare Professor Mafia to a college's program board booking us in, to performing arts centers booking us in. And we were able to build up a client base so that maybe the places that were a little rougher, those places that all they could was offer their gymnasium floor and our sleeping on sleeping bags, maybe we're not going to play that place again because we need to make more money than that, and we need to take care of our people better than that.
I was just listening to something today that said, the most important step is the next one.
One of the great difficulties in the business that I built, that I think is true for so many other businesses, is the idea of dealing with the hand right in front of your face. So for those that are seeing this, and my hand is in front of my face. If you're not seeing this because you're just listening, I'm putting my hand in front of my face and covering up my eyes. And that you're dealing with stuff that is right there in your face. Sometimes you can't make great plans because you're dealing with all the shit that's right there in your face and trying to make it get better and better and better and clearer and move that hand further away from your face so that you can identify not just what do I need to do to survive, but how might I make the best plans to set myself up on the best course. And sometimes it's just a fight to survive. And it's just a fight to navigate all the junk that's right in front of your face. Even if you had more time and distance and money, you might be able to plan it a bit more purposefully. But we were able to do that. And again, being a touring company with no desire to build a theater, we wanted a place to play in the summers, and we wanted to keep touring during the academic year. And so we were based in Harrisonburg, Virginia to start with, because that's where JMU was. That's where I met Ralph Cohen, where he taught, and where the company was born. And one of the things that started happening was people started coming to us about, don't you want to build a theater? And if everything would have gone the way we were taking offers to have it go, there would have been a place in Harrisonburg that was built to our specifications. All we wanted was a black box, that we could do the Shakespeare staging conditions in, and we just wanted it to be there for a few weeks in the summer, and we would be on the road. And we took so many meetings with so many other groups. Okay, all these groups would use this building in downtown Harrisonburg. It could be flexible enough to accommodate the needs that we all had. And they built a place and ignored everything we needed. They built a proscenium movie theater.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And yes, you could fly the screen out. And there was a very small proscenium stage there that was not at all what we wanted for ourselves. Had that gone differently, we would have been in Harrisonburg. We had a group in Richmond that wanted to build a Globe Theater overlooking the James River and wanted us to be the anchor company. And at one point we said, sure, we can do that.
Yeah.
And that was after this horrible building got built in Harrisonburg, and people from Stanton, Virginia came to us and said, you know, the Statler brothers that are from here are no longer doing their free concert every summer that brings in thousands of tourists. What do you think about Shakespeare coming to Stanton to replace the Statlers? And we said, sure, we can do that. Because again, we wanted a base from which to keep touring.
Right.
And so at one point, we were looking around Stanton for a place to build a black box while this Globe project was happening in Richmond. And when I tell this part of the story, I usually say, thank God for unanswered prayers. The Richmond project fell apart, but we had gotten to know the architect for that project. His name was Tom McLaughlin. And at some point, that shifted our thinking from, let's not just build a black box. We've been trying to turn every little hole in the wall we could play into feeling like an Elizabethan or Jacobean theater. Why don't we build Shakespeare's indoor theater here in Stanton? Why don't we build the Blackfriars Playhouse? And we have this architect who was working on the Globe in Richmond. Tom is awesome. Tom, you want to build a Blackfriars? And we had in our sights, this was nearing the end of the 1990s, we could build Shakespeare's indoor theater. Nobody had tried to build a recreation of the Blackfriars, and then eventually maybe we could build a Globe. So we would get Shakespeare's indoor theater and his outdoor theater as part of Shakespeare Mecca here in Stanton, Virginia. And so that's how we ended up building a space that we were then going to occupy 12 months out of the year while also having a tour on the road.
Okay, so you end up building the Blackfriars Playhouse, which is a recreation of Shakespeare's indoor theater, and from there you build into a $4 million a year theater with two companies, one that's out on the road touring and one that's in residence in Stanton. Tell me a little bit about how you got the business to be successful.
I think that building the Blackfriars created a different snowball. So we knew how to do this on the road, and we had set up in residencies before we built the Blackfriars, playing in different cities and playing in the Shenandoah Valley in the summer. And so when we built the Blackfriars, we didn't know that we were going to do 12-month programming in it. Part of it was, again, from that same point of view, we don't need to be here the whole time. You know, that we wanted to keep touring. We wanted to have a home base, and we wanted to keep touring. So we thought perhaps we would be booking in other groups to perform, giving local groups a home, and it was kind of trial and error, figuring things out that, you know, it costs so much money to bring in another group and pay them to be here, give them a ticket split. We would make more money if we just programmed the place ourselves. And so in the first year that the Blackfriars was open, what we ended up doing was we had 3 touring troupes at that point.
Wow.
We had built up our client base on the road enough that we had 2 touring troupes on the road, and then we created a third one, so there'd be a third one at the Blackfriars while 2 was were on the road. And we cycled those 3 different touring troupes through the Blackfriars to create the first year of programming. And then we figured out pretty quickly that our best financial model would be winnow the venues on the road, take the best of the best, and take it down to only 1 troupe on the road, 1 troupe in the Blackfriars. Mm-hmm. And we also knew pretty quickly that as soon as we could hire a troupe of actors that didn't tour, we would be able to grow the experience range, the age range. Touring is hard. Right. And even though we got better conditions every year that we toured, it's still not for people with families or people who, I'm done living out of a suitcase kind of thing. And so we figured out how to have 1 group that didn't tour be in the Blackfriars, and rehearse in different seasons of repertory that also took a little bit of time. We thought that we would run shows for a longer period of time at first because of the different kinds of tourist seasons. Mm-hmm. That whoever came to Stanton as a tourist in the summer was a different group than who came for the fall, for the foliage and whatnot. So we originally had seasons that were longer, and we were not expecting locals to come to the shows. We used perhaps Ashland, Oregon, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, as our biggest model. Ashland, Oregon is around the same size as Stanton, and at that time, in the early 2000s, the locals in Ashland didn't go to the shows. And so we figured, okay, I guess locals don't go to shows, and it's a tourism thing. We found that we had such rabid local fans that we changed programming to give that base of supporters more shows. And so we ended up coming up with what became our norm of 4 separate repertory seasons in the Blackfriars that included 1 season for the touring troupe to come off the road and perform in the Blackfriars, while the resident troupe that didn't tour was rehearsing new shows. So it became, finding the right cycle of thing to maximize the performance schedule, the tourism dollars, the local folks coming, and I think that we just got smarter and smarter with how do we program a big famous Shakespeare title along with other titles that weren't as popular, so that we don't just go through all the Shakespeare's greatest hits too soon. How do we create each season that has its own kind of menu of different flavors, from popularity to style, so that we'd have dramas and comedies, histories, things mixing in a way that would give somebody a reason to come to see 4 shows in a weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you did that was really, really smart, was there was always something to consume. So, you talked about layering while the touring troupe would come back, the resident troupe would be rehearsing. So you've got performances happening of new plays while the resident troupe is rehearsing the next set of shows that's going to open up in a few weeks or a few months. And then when those open, in comes the tour. When the tour goes down, then they start rehearsing what they're going to take out on the road. And I think the other thing that's great about the whole model is that the tour acts as a lead generation tool, in that you go to all these, you bring the product to them. They don't have to come to you, so there's a much lower commitment in the beginning. Let's go down the road to our local theater, movie theater, or performance art venue and see the American Shakespeare Center because they have Taming of the Shrew, a great title, and we can just walk on down and see it, and it's relatively low commitment. But then it creates that spark, and you create the connection with your audience in their hometown. And after, maybe it takes 2 or 3 years of different tours coming to that same spot, and then all of a sudden you've got 5 or 6 people who go, we're going to go to Stanton, and we're going to see 5 shows in one weekend whenever we go there.
That idea of lead generation is what a business person, how a business person would wrap their head around that, and I think that's exactly what it was, and that dual nature of, we're going to come to your hometown and knock your socks off, and we're going to be promoting. And you know what? You should come to our hometown and see us in the world's only recreation of Shakespeare's indoor theater. We're turning your local performing arts center into feeling like the Blackfriars. Don't you love it? Now, don't you want to come see it at the Blackfriars? It's again back to creating an even larger community of people who are like, yes, I like that stuff. I love those photos that you are showing of the Blackfriars. I can't wait to see you there. And I can go there and I can see 4 different shows. It's a great commercial. The touring troupe becomes a traveling commercial that is self-contained. It is entertainment by itself, but it also points the finger back to the mothership.
What were the things that took ASC beyond your typical Shakespeare or just theatrical experience?
What I noticed over the years of looking around at the way other theaters operated, most theaters of a certain size have education arms, education wings. To my dismay, most of those education components were add-ons to those other theaters. They were add-ons because they realized there's grant money to be gained by having education product. And what we wanted to do from the beginning was have education woven into the fabric of everything that we did. So back in those early days, we would not sell workshops outside of a package that included performances. We wanted to come visit classrooms before you come see a show or after you've seen a show, but we wanted our workshops to be about the shows. We didn't want to go in and just be Shakespeare experts. We didn't want to go in and take over for the beleaguered Shakespeare teacher who is desperate for help. Yes, that was something that we were able to do, but we wanted it to be in connection with our style of performance and what we were performing. We were experts at performing that title with that group of people under those kinds of staging conditions. And so that made our education offerings really specific to all the other stuff that we did. And yes, we were able to write grants and do seminars and do teacher workshops and do all kinds of things that in the end spread that same gospel of, isn't Shakespeare cool when you do it under the same kinds of conditions that he was writing for? And so that just grew and grew as we found more and better ways to reach out to students, to reach out to teachers. It's one thing to turn a classroom of kids onto Shakespeare in a way that is awesome for them. But if we can take a classroom full of teachers and turn them into, this is how you make Shakespeare fun for all of your classes, then we're creating a better world, because kids are seeing what's great about Shakespeare, and we're creating future customers for the stuff that we do.
Yeah, it makes me think of Jim Collins and Jerry Porras. They say, preserve the core and stimulate progress. When they talk about great companies, the core being the thing that made it all work, the thing that drives the company, that it's that why or the purpose of why you show up to do the thing that you do. And so ASC not doing the education thing as an addition or an add-on, we have to do education, but it being driven by the core philosophy of the American Shakespeare Center. Everything comes from that and it grows from that natural place, makes it successful in whatever iteration it ends up being in.
Yes, yes. And so there are a lot of kind of core business things in that model that we were making up as we went along and just tried to get better at them as we went along and trial and error it into taking what works and making it work better, taking what works less well and either jettisoning it or transitioning it into something else.
So that leads me to theater where it is today. So you've built a company from scratch and taken it to a $4 million a year theater, extremely successful. The theater industry has just been through a lot of turmoil with COVID and being completely shut down, and then trying to come back from that and rebuild the audience. So talking about that core, the why, I mean, what is the thing that's going to drive audiences back into theater?
So I retired from the ASC not knowing what I was going to do next, thinking perhaps I would go to other places and use all the cool tricks we've invented in 400 years and do a kind of theater that I didn't want to do at the Blackfriars, but I'd love to explore someplace else. What turned out, what happened instead was I got asked to be a consultant and an educator and a director in other places to do Shakespeare staging conditions, to help other theaters through their growing pains based on the growing pains that I had gone through. And so it became well, here's some stuff that I did that I would not recommend you do. Here are some things that worked for me. Here are some things that I think might work for you. And so I ended up traveling the country doing all kinds of different things and basically bringing more of Shakespeare's staging conditions to these other places. And
was that pre-pandemic?
That was pre-pandemic. So
Okay.
that started end of 2017 into 2018. And what ended up happening for me during the pandemic was different than other folks because I kept working through the whole pandemic. I kept being able to teach and consult and prep for plays that sometimes got pushed further in advance, but I only had one canceled gig, and everything else morphed and became part of the think tank that was ending up happening industry-wide. As the industry had to shut down for COVID, it became this huge time of reflection. And it was during that time, as I was, going on evening walks with my wife, bitching and moaning about what theater needs to do coming out of COVID, that I ended up writing an article on called "You Say You Want a Revolution." Rebuilding the theater industry from the ground up post-COVID. We had the combination of the very visible death of black humans at the hands of white police officers. We had this huge social justice awareness awakening going on in the country, and we had COVID. And there was all this stuff making us take a different look at how have we been doing theater in nonprofit America? When did it start? How did it evolve? What were we doing? Now that we are shut down, now that there is no theater happening, we were talking about all these changes that we could make coming out of COVID. And I wrote an article that broke down how Shakespeare's staging conditions are actually the starting point for how to help us regrow the industry from the inside out with a different kind of mindset. So not only is it, in my opinion, was it about, let's look at all the money we spend on tech and let's spend that money differently. Let's pay people full time. Let's take this gig economy and change it. I mean, theater has been a place where you get a full-time job if you're the third level of marketing assistant. You get 12 months of pay and benefits and health care while you are serving the work on stage for an actor who is only hired for 3 months and is on their own for health insurance. If they're a part of a union or not part of a union, it was so grossly unfair, and it was not making good business sense. So in some ways, the lockdown was a hallelujah, come to Jesus. We can now begin again with different things in place. A lot of this stuff happened in the huge economic downturn of the Great Recession in 2008. In 2008, lots of theaters died, or they had to scale way back, but they rebuilt themselves in the same image. They didn't necessarily change how they did stuff. They just reduced and then built back up. And the idea with the lockdown was, no, we can grow back better than that. And we were thinking better in part because of social justice awareness. There was just this huge national thing of, we've been doing a lot of shit that's not only unfair, it doesn't make business sense. We're failing in certain ways. When we come out of the lockdown, we can do this shit better.
Yeah, I think the pandemic on so many levels had us looking inward. On an individual level, we looked and said, okay, what am I doing in my life? Because my life was going along, everything was normal, and then boom, everything changed, and it forced you to look at what was going on and decide, do I like it or do I not? And what you said too about the chance to start again, I think was very clear for everybody. And I think that also translated societally. I think we saw that. And then I think politically we saw that too. But then it is funny because here we are on the other side, knock on wood, the other side of the pandemic, and not too much has changed, right?
I think that a lot of theaters died. A lot of theaters, didn't come back. Mm-hmm. Some theaters did come back different. And I don't want to make blanket statements that imply that I think it's all fucking failures and everything still sucks just as bad. I think that there are pockets of theaters that have reopened after lockdown who are thriving. Mm-hmm. I think there are far more who are struggling. And I think there's a lot of reasons for the struggle. And I think there is a lot that is broken and rotten at the heart of how we've created theater for so many decades that needs to change for us to have a future theater industry in this country.
What's the number one thing? What needs to change?
Wow, I'm such a anti-fan of superlatives and creating that list of most important, next most important. So
okay, fair enough. What are a few things that you think need to change? Not the number one, but what are the things that come to mind first?
Here's the artistic thing that is connected to money, but the eye first goes to the artistic part of it. Art and business should go hand in hand. Great art and great business should be one and the same. If they are not, you're fucking it up. But artistically, in my opinion, the future of theater is getting away from being movies on stage. That theater of the imagination is an audience getting, hey, you've got a UPS dude out there. Hi, UPS dude. That Shakespeare was writing at a time where he couldn't turn the lights off on the audience when he was performing outdoors, and they didn't turn the lights off on the audience when he was indoors. So he was not writing for lights on the stage, lights off on the audience. And in the English-speaking world, they left the lights on the audience for decades and decades and decades and decades after other places in Europe were turning the lights off on the audience. So English-speaking theater didn't go to that until pretty darn close to the advent of movies. And so, in my opinion, the theater industry in the United States, by the time we hit lockdown, was doing its best to be live movies on stage. And what I think the lockdown should have told us was, yeah, you can stream stuff on your laptop and keep entertainment going, but the audience doesn't need to be a part of that streaming from Netflix. That being movies on stage does not engage an audience the same way as leave the lights on the audience, put the audience on three sides of the stage, make the audience a part of the world of the play. You do not have to build a big set for a Shakespeare play to work, because Shakespeare didn't write for a big set. He wrote for this beautiful building to be kind of visual candy back there, while he was asking the audience to imagine what Macbeth's castle looked like. He wrote for the audience to imagine in Antony and Cleopatra going from Egypt to Rome, back to Egypt, to the Mediterranean Sea, back to Rome, back to Egypt. He could do all of this cinematic quick cutting inside the language, and the audience got to imagine what the set looked like.
Yeah, that makes me think of Peter Brook, who says, the second you put any object other than the body of the actor on the stage, then all of a sudden we have to be wherever that object might actually exist. Whereas when you only have a blank behind them, then it's easy for us to go along with here we are at the bus stop, and then we walk, 2 steps this way, and now we're at home. And just saying the words, and now we're at home, the audience has the ability to imagine that now we are, and there's nothing there to signify anything otherwise.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think engaging with the imagination, and really, it's just, like you said, it's normal business stuff, right? We have to differentiate and play to our strengths in theater, which are not the technical elements. Movies have surpassed us again and again and again, and they have all of the resources to do so forever. So we have to do the opposite.
Movies will always be better at being movies than live theater can ever, ever, ever be. But live theater can engage and connect and create community in a way a movie can never, ever, ever do. We need, and I refer to that theater of the imagination versus theater of illusion. That we've been so busy trying to create theater of illusion, create that movie spectacle on stage, that we've put an inordinate amount of our budgets into creating those visuals in trying to be like movies, that we're missing what makes theater special. And to me, the music industry has thrived in coming back from COVID, where theater industry has failed. The music industry is about being there live, interacting with a band, with a singer, with an act. You can play a record at home. You can stream on Spotify or whatever however you get your music. You can listen to music without seeing a live band.
You can watch a live performance that happened 2 years ago.
Yes,
on your TV anytime through Netflix.
But I think the reason that live music performances have come back is because that scratched the itch. That was meeting the need that people had to get out of their damn homes, be with other people, be in a community where we experience something together. And I think that's awesome. I think theater, in the stories we tell, in the rides we go on with these characters, it's even more powerful if it's just a funny ha-ha play or it is something deep and disturbing. There is something to experience as a community that we crave. And audiences are not going back to theater because theater hasn't been delivering that. So the art will die. Theater will die if it doesn't embrace what it does better, which is imagination and building community. The bricks and mortar, both literally and figuratively, I know those words now mean the same thing, to create that art also has to change. This idea that we touched on earlier, that somehow a person working in the office of a theater gets a year-round job and benefits, but the people performing it don't, is fucking stupid. It's just fucking stupid. It makes no sense monetarily or righteously or spiritually in any way, shape, or form. It's dumb. And we're only doing it because that's the way it's always been done.
Which is usually not a very good reason to do anything.
No!
And it makes me think, when theater tries to compete with movies and Hollywood on spectacle, they spend so much of their budget there that there isn't anything left over to pay the great actors that you need to handle the great plays that you're trying to put on. And so now you've got people who don't have the skill set trying to do that thing, and there's a ton of spectacle, but the audience knows this actor doesn't have the capabilities to do this, even if they don't know it in their brain or can articulate it. They feel it in their guts, right?
Yes, and I think all of that stuff that we were talking about regarding the kind of community you build when you leave the lights on and you perform in repertory and you've got the same actors in different shows every night, and you're walking on the street and the people on the street know who you are, there is all of that level of community that actually creates a better bottom line if you figure out how to do that in a way that is full-time, year-round employment. And as soon as you say, our focus is not going to be spending all that money on technical stuff, let's invest in our people so that our people that are on the stage, behind the scenes, in the office, that it's all part of one communal effort, one overall team that is working together to create year-round employment for everybody that is fair, that is equitable, and ends up making better art, that ends up making more money. And we go back to education. One way to make more money that most theaters have not figured out how to capitalize on is during times of the year where I may not be able to put you as an actor on stage 12 months of the year. But when you're not on stage, I can put you in a classroom. I can make money and make a better world by creating educational programs that help teachers and students become their best selves, while I'm also creating income to continue to pay you full time. There is a way that education is another secret weapon to pay for year-round employment. And that's something that should have been a lesson learned from the pandemic that most people haven't learned.
Tell me about this as someone who ran a nonprofit, because I was reading that often nonprofits will do zero-based budgeting, where they're trying to spend all of the money that they have so that they can apply for grants and say, look, we need more money. They can go to donors, say, look, we need more money. Because if they don't, if they hold on to anything, then apparently donors or grants will be like, well, but you have some, so you don't need any more. But that is so backwards and not the way that it works in a for-profit business where retained earnings is how you grow, right? If you retain earnings, it means you can live to fight another day if something like COVID comes along. I've heard, I can't confirm it, but I've heard that Bill Gates, when he was building Microsoft, wanted to have 1 year of payroll and expenses in the bank so that if something happened, they could continue for 1 whole year without any interruptions to them trying to find a way out the other side. And so was that something that you ran into running a nonprofit? And what's the logic to it, and is there a better way?
There's a lot to unpack there. Let's go back to where you started that question. The idea of spending down to zero at the end of every fiscal year, wherever that came from, whatever motivated that, it's bullshit and makes zero business sense. If there was a time where a foundation was looking for you to zero out, to see you at nothing, to be able to give you money, that time is long gone. And I think part of what's broken in the nonprofit theater world is that we don't run the business from the same financial models as for-profit business, and that's wrong, in my opinion. And again, part of the top tier lessons we should have learned from the damn lockdown was, if you are, here's one of my favorite terms, if you are undercapitalized, do you know how to change that? Make more money than you spend. Make more money than you spend. There is nothing in the nonprofit structure that prohibits that. And if you don't do that now, you're a fucking moron. Because there are times where you do not meet your budget. And, again, back to brokenness, the nonprofit model has been built for so many decades on, we can only raise 40 to 50% of our budget through earned income. The rest of it has to be donations.
Right.
That's a shitty business model, everybody that's listening to this. Shitty. We have to run our businesses like good businesses. And if you are dependent on donors for a certain level and grants on certain levels, if you've been doing this for any amount of time, you've come across bad times where you can't make that money.
Yeah.
And so you're going to be in emergency mode every other year, or in some case, every year. If you don't, here, Business 101 that took me and my company too many damn years to figure out, base your expenses on a 3-year rolling average of your income. Take the last 3 years, take the average of what you've made, then build your expenses based on that. Rather than what I did for too many years, well, we made X number of dollars, we should be able to grow this amount of percent. That's a pretty conservative amount, and so that's what we're going to budget to. Year after year, having to slash expenses in the middle of a fiscal year because we weren't meeting those goals.
Yeah.
We have to change the not-for-profit business model to be more like a for-profit business model. And it's possible. It's possible if we rethink how we put up shows, the shows in repertory, education, hiring full-time people. There is a way that all of that financial change in the industry makes for better fiscal soundness.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to throw the shit out the window that we've been doing. And the pandemic was the perfect time because we went to zero.
Right.
We had nothing but wide open road in front of us to choose whatever path, and we've been choosing to rebuild what we did before,
Yeah.
and
So-
and it's continuing to fail.
I want to bring up what you were talking about in that
The shit or the fuck?
I want to bring up simplicity and complexity, in that we, as human beings, love to take that which is simple and find ways to complicate it.
Sure.
And you said something that about if you're undercapitalized, it means you have to earn more money, right? And in the personal finance world, it's as simple as you have to spend less than you make. And now you have options, even in the simplicity, right? You can either go out and earn more money, or you can look inward and spend less of the money that you're already earning, right? And either way, you create margin, you create some profit, you create some space, some breathing room. And we see the same thing in personal fitness, right? I mean, look, we love to complicate. We love the next diet pill. We love the next workout regime. You know, anything that's new and interesting and complicated. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to calories in and calories out, right? What are you eating, and what are you burning? And you've got options. You can either eat less, or you can burn more if you want to lose weight. But those are really the only two options that you have. And so I think that one of the things that we need to do is look at what is essential to I mean, in every sense of the word, look at what's essential, and then take away all of the clutter and the complication as much as we can. I mean, we will always then start to complicate again, but as much as we can, simplify.
Yes, and I think that you see some of that going on in the industry right now, where big companies have radically reduced their seasons. They're trying to cut back on expenses to do that very thing that you said. The problem is that they're not doing it from the ground up. They're doing it from this monster thing that they created in the past that they have rebuilt, and they're trying to, they think if they save the money by creating less product, that's going to help their bottom line. But they're also creating less product, which means they're creating less income. And that's why, if I could snap my fingers and make anything happen, it would be take everything away. Kind of like we just did. But that thing that you just said, why do we exist? What is essential for us to, why should we exist? What are we doing in the world that makes the world a better place? And theater does not start with that. Theater is layer upon layer of crap built on crap, that just answering that simple question is so fucking hard because of the layers of accumulation. Mm-hmm. But that's it. Why should we exist? And then how do we exist to make that thing happen? And how can we start small and then build more? And by starting small, that's where we get back to how money and art and social justice all combine, that you're actually going to create a stronger business if you create a more fair business. And by that, you're paying actors full-time just like you're paying the marketing department full-time. That also goes to, if you have more different kinds of people on stage, then you're going to have more different kinds of people in the audience, which means you're going to make more money. this, we've got to open our brains to be seeing how fiscal soundness, social justice, pay equity, and creating damn fun entertainment are all part of the same package, that they all feed off of each other. And doing less than in any one of those areas is going to fuck it up. And in the end, what it's really going to mean is you're going to make less money. And you're going to fail. And that's what theaters are experiencing right now. And some of them from the best hearts are saying, yeah, I agree with all that stuff. So here we are, we're going to do all new plays by writers of color. And we haven't cultivated any audience for that. And somehow we think that is going to be the thing that makes the biggest difference.
Right.
It can be a part of it, but if that's what you're counting on, then you're counting on a lot of luck, which does not seem to make great business sense to me.
And you are building a business.
Yes, I am. I'm trying to take everything that I learned in the 30 years of my old company and the 6 years since then, and the lockdown, and the social justice awareness, and this is going to immediately sound contrary to what I just said, but I am talking about building a colossus from scratch. And where my first 30 years was about building something small that snowballed, I'm trying to take everything that I've learned and create a Shakespeare festival on the size and scope of what is the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the Utah Shakespeare Festival, the Shakespeare Festival in Stratford, Ontario. I'm trying to take those things plus what I did, plus the Globe in London, and create a unique model that has at its core a recreation of Shakespeare's 1614 Globe Theater, and a theater campus that also includes a performing arts and education center that has a 900-seat thrust theater, a black box, and an outdoor amphitheater, as well as tons of space for workshops, so that we can create that model of tourist draw from local, regional, national, international, using the Shakespeare Professor Mafia again, as well as the architectural brilliance of making a building that's as historically accurate as we can of Shakespeare's Second Globe. We're talking about creating, I'm going to use this term, I'm going to start to own this term, because it was used when Sam Wanamaker wanted to build the Globe in London. It was used derisively for him. But we're creating a Disneyland kind of experience where there are so many different kinds of rides available. If you're not into Shakespeare, we've got so much. We've got musicals, we've got comedies, we've got other kinds of plays going on, we've got experimental things happening in the black box, but we've also got Shakespeare staging conditions in what will be the world's only timber-framed recreation of the 1614 Globe.
And it is called, this project,
the American Globe Center.
Here it is. Here's the website, so you can visit that at americanglobecenter.org, and I'll click around as Jim continues to describe it.
I think that one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of months of living up in Connecticut and working on this project is there used to be a theater in Stratford, Connecticut. It was called the American Shakespeare Theater Festival. Or at one point it was called Festival Theater. It changed its name a couple of times, but it opened in 1955, and John Houseman was involved in it, and it had, celebrities from New York, from James Earl Jones to Christopher Plummer, just all kinds of famous people doing summer Shakespeare, and it ran for 30 years and died. And that building was there and kind of fallow for 30 years, and lots of projects came along to re-outfit that theater. But a couple of years ago, arsonists got in there and burned it to the ground, which is actually another thank God for unanswered prayers, because having a blank slate to build on that property is now, I think, gives the possibility for something so much better than building in the shell of that old building. But what I have discovered in the last few months is that that town might not want this project. That the idea of increasing tourism, the idea of increasing economic development for the town, the idea for education booming, that scares a lot of people because it's big. And so we've been working on trying to make this project sound that it could actually go in a few other different locations. So where we thought we were going to build it in one particular location in Stratford, Connecticut, it may end up being in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It may be in Stamford, Connecticut. It may be in Milford. And we're now, it still means doing all of the groundwork to create community support. But that piece of land in Stratford, Connecticut is owned by the town council. Wow. And that could be the thing that keeps it from being built there. But it doesn't have to be built there. The idea is so good, and the idea is so needed to help transform our theater industry and create a revolution, that it's just a matter of us getting in front of the right people at the right time. We're also doing something new where, in addition to being a not-for-profit and you being able to donate to this project and write it off on your taxes, we've also got an investor model. So the combination of investors who invest X number of millions and get a return on that investment, in addition to a donor base, we're double dipping in how we approach that to hopefully get bigger buy-in and hopefully make it happen faster.
You know, in 2019, I went from being a full-time actor to starting this place, a small wine and beer bar in the small town of Stanton, where the American Shakespeare Center came to be. And you, as someone who has now started multiple businesses, you always think it's going to go one way, right? And that's the point of having vision, right? You need to have a vision, but there's also this beautiful transformation that happens, not unlike the transformation of the collaborative process of theater, where you put the vision together, you start to communicate the vision, and then something happens, and the people that you're serving, they respond and they communicate back, and they shift and change what that vision is. It's not that it doesn't go away, but it transforms into something a little bit different. And so I imagine that might be where you are in the process of, we thought it was going to look just like this in this one location, but it can look like this in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
And it can look even a lot of different ways too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're not locked in to any one location or any one design yet. Mm-hmm. And I think that what you just said, there's a lot of, it's simple and yet it's also complicated at the same time, that you can have a vision that opens up to let others in, that doesn't mean that you change the vision on a whim. It's not that you then lead by popularity poll. But the whole point in building something that involves community, it just like you said, you've got to listen, and you've got to be able to tweak and morph based on whom you are letting in, whom you are interacting with, whom you want to serve. And to me, that's the hardest part of great leadership, is to know how to open up and let others own it and be a part of it and not lose the soul of it. And that's harder than it sounds.
Yeah, stay true to the vision, but be open to the fact that it might change. I mean, so I was reading about what's called UX design, user experience, right? And it's a whole field now, and it's been around for a long time. But you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, and then you make changes based on that experience. And so as you are thinking about a product for development for a business, whether it's a nonprofit business or a for-profit business, you have to put yourself in the mind of the consumer as best you can. And then you have to put that product into actual consumers' hands and see what do they think about it. And then based on their feedback, then you have the ability to slightly pivot. You can refine the product, and then you can put it out again and see, okay, well, what did this get a little bit better? And I was reading about the Segway. You remember the Segway? It was the two-wheel.
Oh, yeah.
There were Segway
yeah.
tours. I mean, so this is an example of when you don't do this, right? They put just all of this money up front into the design and production process, but they neglected the part where you take it to the market and say, do you want this thing? Is this something that you're interested in? And so then they wound up with this, what they thought was an amazing offer to a market of people who just said, we are not interested in that thing.
Oh.
And so a huge waste of revenue and a market that was completely disinterested. Whereas what you're doing in the beginning, involving the community and saying, look, we are in this for you. What do you want? What do you need? It's not going to shift all of the core visions that you have talked about, in this last hour and a half. But it allows you to make tweaks, right? Okay, if you don't want it in red, it can be blue. Why can't it be blue?
Yeah, and the 30 years that I spent with the American Shakespeare Center was a whole bunch of that. That 3 decades worth of, well, we tried this like this, and here's what we learned, and here's what we took in, here's how we morphed that to do that thing better.
Right.
Nothing survives without that kind of nimble, and I know this word is overused, but ability to pivot, the ability to see a situation and change based on what you think and what other people tell you they think will make a better product.
Right. Yep. Over and over again this last year, it's been all about incremental change. What can you do? What can you take care of today? What can get you one step closer? And not letting, I could imagine that trying to build something of the magnitude that you are going to build could be extremely paralyzing, because how do I do something on that scale? And the answer is you just do a lot of little things. You do the thing that you can do today.
Right.
So what are your next steps?
Well, my initial response, how do you do it? One of the things that I'm doing is setting up meetings that will put teaching artists into Stratford, Connecticut elementary and middle schools in the next month, because I want to get to those students, I want to get to those teachers, I want to get to those students' parents, and I want to show them the education possibilities with this project. Mm-hmm. So that's about as grassroots as you can possibly be. In some ways, after having watched for the fifth or sixth time all 7 seasons of The West Wing, this feels like retail politics. I need to shake every hand and kiss every baby, and I need to be able to meet with businesses to get them excited to have tourists coming into the region and get them talking to city council members. I am doing next week, we're having a public meeting in a local community center where we'll talk about the scope of our project. We'll do a demo of here's what Shakespeare is like with a British accent and the lights off on the audience, and here's our style of doing that. So just trying to reach people from a small scale. Who can I reach today? Who can I reach tomorrow? Mm-hmm. What meetings can I be having to get in front of those investors, in front of those bigger donors? So it's from the tiniest of tiny with the vision of how do I get to the biggest of the big to end up getting folks excited about it and those with means the ability to support it.
Okay, I think we need to wrap this up.
Okay.
Do you consider yourself an artist?
I like talking about other people as artists more than I like talking about myself as an artist. I view the term artist with so much reverence that sometimes I think that my artistry is giving the platform for other artists to do their thing. So in some ways, I think of myself as an administrator, as a creator before I use that word artist. But I suppose that if I'm doing my job as well as I possibly can, then hell yeah, there's a lot of artistry involved in creating the opportunity for different kinds of artists to participate. So I think that some person who has gained a certain amount of fame and notoriety was on the cover of a book called The Art of the Deal. The art of creating space for artists is really only possible if you're an artist yourself. So I also think that somebody in an administrative role needs to think about stuff that perhaps other artists in different parts of the organization don't need to think about. But that's just kind of compartmentalizing the idea that any business of any size is going to have different kinds of artists involved in it. Yeah. So I think that I would be doing my reverence for the term artist a disservice if I didn't say, damn Skippy, I'm trying to be as great an artist as I can to create an environment for all of us to thrive in.
Jim, thank you so much. It's always a great honor to talk with you and to be in your presence. So I really appreciate you being here.
I can't wait for us to keep working together.
All right, thanks. And we'll have many more conversations like this, I'm very sure.